February 28th, 2026. Operation Epic Fury. Two United States Navy supercarriers launched the heaviest sustained aerial campaign since Iraq 2003. USS Abraham Lincoln holds the Arabian Sea, dismantling early warning radar chains and opening corridors from the east. USS Gerald R. Ford sits in the eastern Mediterranean, striking from the west. Two carriers, two oceans, one coordinated storm, falling on Iran from opposite ends of the compass. 5 days in, CENTCOM does something that makes zero intuitive sense. They move the Ford. $13 billion of nuclear-powered steel slides through the Suez Canal and repositions into the Red Sea. The most expensive warship ever built just abandoned its attack corridor in the middle of active combat. And here is the detail nobody on television is talking about. On the same day, 4,500 nautical miles away, the USS George H.W. Bush quietly completed her final war certification. Off the coast of Virginia, magazines full, air wing locked, destination confirmed by the Department of Defense, the Eastern Mediterranean, the exact position the Ford just vacated. The pundits call the Ford's move repositioning. They call the Bush a reinforcement. They are wrong on both counts. You do not reinforce a position by sending a replacement to the spot you just vacated. You do not reposition your most advanced carrier into a different ocean in the middle of a war, unless you are building something. And what CENTCOM is building is not a stronger hammer. It is a geometry, a three-carrier triangle, with each vertex locking a choke point that connects Iran to the outside world. Why? Why split $40 billion of irreplaceable steel across 3 oceans against a single country? Why not stack all 3 carriers together and achieve kinematic saturation from a single vector? Because concentrated firepower is what amateurs want. Geometric strangulation is what engineers build. And by the time you finish this video, you will understand the physics of why dispersion destroys more efficiently than mass. If you are proud of these men and the machines they operate, type "proud" in the comments. Subscribe to Navy Decoded. We do not sell narratives here. We sell engineering. To understand why this geometry works, you first have to understand the map and the trap Iran built for us inside it. To understand why we refuse to stack 3 carriers together, you have to look at the map. Unfold it. Look at the 3 hydrodynamic choke points surrounding the Islamic Republic. To the south, the Strait of Hormuz, 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point, but with operable shipping lanes, restricted to just 2 nautical miles in each direction. 20% of the planet's oil flowing through that keyhole every day. To the southwest, Bab el-Mandeb at the mouth of the Red Sea, 12% of global maritime trade, squeezed between Yemen and Djibouti. To the northwest, the Suez Canal, another 12 to 15% of international commerce, 3 narrow corridors, 3 pressure valves, controlling the flow of energy, revenue, and strategic oxygen to an entire regime. Block 1, and the economy hemorrhages. Block all 3, and Iran suffocates. Now look at the one place we did not put a carrier, the Persian Gulf. Every previous American operation, Praying Mantis, Southern Watch, Prosperity Guardian, placed at least 1 carrier inside those waters. Why not now? Because the Gulf is a bathtub, a semi-enclosed body of water, barely 530 nautical miles long. A 100,000-ton carrier inside that bathtub loses the one asset keeping it alive: sea room. Iran spent 40 years turning that bathtub into a kill box. The first layer is speed. Fast attack craft exceeding 50 knots, closing distance faster than Aegis can cycle through its engagement protocol. Behind them, shore-based cruise missiles, launch from mountain positions, invisible to shipborne radar until motor ignition. And behind those, drone swarms saturate the terminal defense envelope, at ranges so short that warning time collapses to under 60 seconds. Stack the layers together, and the math is lethal. The time it takes our systems to detect, classify, authorize, and fire is longer than the flight time of the weapon trying to kill us. We would die before we were allowed to shoot back. Iran's entire anti-access strategy was a bet that we would sail into that trap. We refused. Instead, we pulled every carrier into deep, open water, and we placed each one at a choke point. Lincoln in the Arabian Sea, locking Hormuz, Ford in the Eastern Mediterranean, then transiting to the Red Sea to lock Bab el-Mandeb, Bush heading for the Mediterranean to lock Suez. 3 carriers, 3 choke points, 3 walls of a coffin, with the lid closing. But the pundits still ask, why not put all 3 together? Triple the aircraft, overwhelm them? The answer is brutal, and it is simple. If you attack from one direction, the enemy defends one direction. If you attack from three, the enemy cannot defend any. Concentrated firepower gives Iran one problem to solve. 3 carriers in 3 oceans give Iran an equation with no solution. Now look at what each carrier does to that equation. Arabian Sea. Condition: MCON Alpha. All RF emissions secured. 100,000 long tons of displacement. Completely decoupled from the electromagnetic spectrum. Lincoln carries the F-35C Lightning II, the only 5th-generation stealth fighter on any carrier in this theater. That distinction matters. When the first wave launched, the F-35Cs did not fly toward Iran to deliver precision ordnance. They flew toward Iran to blind it. Consider what that means. A radar cross-section of 0.005 square meters. The electromagnetic signature of a steel bearing. Iran's southern air defenses, Bavar 373, 3rd Cordad, were designed to detect and engage 4th-generation fighters at 100 nautical miles. Against a signature this small, they see nothing until the aircraft is already inside the engagement envelope, and by then, the kill chain runs in reverse. The moment a battery activates its fire control radar, EA-18G Growlers geolocate the emission. AGM-88G AAR-GMER anti-radiation missiles launch straight down the beam. Turn the radar on, you absorb a kinetic strike. Shut it down to survive. Our millimeter wave seekers have already memorized your position. The weapon finds you either way. The corridor opens. Physics does not negotiate. Behind those corridors, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers opened VLS cells and sent tomahawks low across the Gulf of Oman. IRGC command nodes along Hormuz collapsed. Coastal missile batteries went silent. The eastern defense perimeter did not bend. It disappeared. But one blade cuts one direction, and one direction is something Iran's defense can still absorb. To break the geometry, you need a second blade, from the opposite end of the compass. That second blade was already in position. The USS Gerald R. Ford had entered the eastern Mediterranean, carrying Carrier Air Wing 8. No F-35C, no stealth capability. Ford does not need to be invisible. Ford's advantage is something more fundamental: tempo. The electromagnetic aircraft launch system, EMALS, replaces the steam catapults that still power every Nimitz-class carrier. Where steam catapults slam 66,000 pounds of aircraft down a 300-foot track with a single mechanical impulse. EMALS accelerates with digitally calibrated precision, smoother, faster, and repeatable at a rate steam cannot sustain. The result? 160 sorties per day in sustained operations, 270 in surge, every 90 seconds. A fully loaded Super Hornet climbs back into the sky. Ford does not just launch aircraft. Ford sustains a tempo of firepower that no other warship on the planet can match. When Ford struck from the west, while Lincoln tore corridors from the east, Iran's air defense faced a problem it was never configured to solve: simultaneous pressure from opposite ends of the compass. Radar energy that could hold a wall against one direction had to split across two. Each sector thinned. Corridors that were narrow under single-axis attack widened into highways under dual-axis geometry. 2 carriers, 2 blades, and Iran was bleeding from both. Then, on March 5th, 7 days into the campaign, Ford did something the pundits could not explain. She left her attack corridor in the Mediterranean, slid through the Suez Canal, turned south into the Red Sea. The reason was not mysterious. It was arithmetic. For 18 months before Epic Fury, the Houthis in Yemen had turned the Red Sea into the most dangerous commercial waterway on Earth. Over 200 attacks on shipping since November 2023, sinking the Ruby Mar, forcing crew evacuations under fire, driving the global shipping industry to reroute around the Cape of Good Hope, at enormous cost. Operation Prosperity Guardian, a multinational naval coalition assembled to stop it, had failed. When Epic Fury struck Iran, Houthi leadership declared immediate solidarity and promised escalation. Their missiles were Iranian-supplied. Their targeting data was Iranian-connected. The Red Sea was not a sideshow. It was a second front, and it was already burning. Meanwhile, Israel had committed everything to Operation Roaring Lion, pulling interceptors north and east. The southern flank facing Yemen was wide open. Ford repositioned into that gap and solved 3 problems with a single transit: a shield between Yemen and Israel, a new strike corridor into Iran from the southwest, and a chokehold on the supply line feeding Tehran's most active proxy. The pundits saw a carrier abandoning its position. We see a variable being moved inside a larger equation, because what Ford left behind in the Eastern Mediterranean was not an empty ocean. It was an invitation. And the question is, who accepts it? The answer was already loading ammunition. On the other side of the Atlantic, the same day Ford transited Suez, the USS George H.W. Bush completed her final war certification. Off the coast of Virginia, CVW-7 locked and loaded. VFA-103, Jolly Rogers. VFA-143, Pukin Dogs. VAQ-140, Patriots. Every squadron at full combat-ready status. Destination confirmed, the Eastern Mediterranean. The exact position Ford had just vacated. Same day, not coincidence, choreography. While Lincoln and Ford fought the two-carrier war, the Bush sat at Norfolk, refueled, rearmed. Fresh SM-6 interceptors loaded into every escort's vertical launch cells. Zero combat fatigue, zero wear, a fully loaded weapon, waiting for the order to cross the Atlantic. And here is the variable Iran is not calculating. Ford has been at sea since June 24, 2025, over 9 months of continuous deployment. Destroyer escorts have been burning through irreplaceable interceptors at a rate that strains the entire Western inventory. Aircrew fatigue is compounding faster than crew rotations can absorb. Iran watches this entropy through satellite feeds and counts the days until our tempo breaks. They believe time is their weapon, that if they endure long enough, the two-carrier war collapses under its own weight. What they do not see is a fresh carrier strike group loading at Norfolk right now. Enough firepower, enough fresh crews, enough interceptors to restart the entire campaign from zero. The entropy Iran is counting on evaporates the moment that flight deck crosses the Atlantic. 3 blades, 3 oceans. And when the third one locks into position, the geometry stops being a threat. It becomes a cage. Now do the math on what happens when the third carrier arrives. One direction. If only Lincoln attacked from the southeast, Iran would concentrate every Bavar 373, every S-300, every 3rd Cordad battery into a single wall facing the Arabian Sea. 100% of radar energy on one sector. Dense corridor, thick defense. Iran survives. 2 directions. Lincoln from the southeast, Ford from the southwest. Iran splits its defense, 50% per sector. Each wall thins, corridors widen. We saw the result: over 2,000 targets struck, 30 warships destroyed, radar chains collapsing. Iran is bleeding, but it is still standing. 2 directions wound, they do not kill. 3 directions. Bush from the northwest. Iran now divides what remains across 3 sectors. Each sector drops to roughly 1/3 of original capacity, and that is the before. Factor in 10 days of attrition from the two-carrier war, and each sector drops to less than 20%. Below the minimum threshold for any coordinated intercept. Below the density needed to track a single incoming aircraft. The defense does not thin, it disappears. That is the mathematics. 1 direction is survivable, 2 directions are painful, 3 directions are fatal. The third carrier does not add firepower, it adds the direction that breaks the equation. But the bombing was never the war. The bombing was the precondition. Look at the map again. Look at where each carrier sits, not what it strikes, but where it stands. Lincoln holds the Arabian Sea, controlling the Strait of Hormuz, 90% of Iran's oil exports. Roughly 1.6 million barrels per day flow through that 21 nautical mile keyhole. Oil and natural gas account for 82% of Iran's total export revenue, $46 billion a year, flowing through a strait now patrolled by a carrier strike group that has already destroyed every Iranian warship and coastal missile battery capable of threatening commercial traffic. Iran built a pipeline to Jask to bypass Hormuz. It failed after a single trial shipment. There is no alternative route. Lincoln does not need to fire another missile. Lincoln just needs to sit there, and Iran's economy bleeds out, at 1.6 million barrels per day. Ford holds the Red Sea, controlling Bab el-Mandeb. Every weapon shipment from Iranian allies, every missile component, every drone kit, every piece of sanctioned technology moving between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean passes through that strait. Ford is not just shielding Israel from Houthi attacks. Ford is cutting the supply line that feeds Iran's proxy network across the entire region. No resupply, no reinforcement. The logistical umbilical cords that Tehran spent decades extending, across Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, all of them severed. Bush will hold the eastern Mediterranean, controlling the western approach to the Suez Canal, the last corridor connecting Iran to European markets, to diplomatic channels, to any remaining economic oxygen. When that vertex locks into position, the geometry is complete. 3 carriers, 3 choke points, 3 walls of a coffin, and the lid just closed. Iran cannot export oil. Iran cannot import weapons. Iran cannot resupply its proxies. Iran cannot fund its military. And Iran cannot break the siege. Because the same carriers that built the walls have already destroyed the navy and coastal defenses that might have challenged them. The air campaign was not the end. It was the key that locked the doors. And now the doors are locked from the outside, by 3 ships floating in international waters, answering to no host nation, visible on no transponder, requiring no permission to stay. This is not a bombing campaign. This is a siege. And sieges do not end with a bang. They end with silence. The silence of an economy that stopped breathing, a military that ran out of parts, and a regime that discovered that 40 years of preparing for war meant nothing. When the enemy never came through the door, the enemy locked it shut. We did not defeat Iran with firepower. We cut Iran from the world with geometry. No oil out, no weapons in, no exit. 3 ships, 3 choke points, 1 coffin. So close the loop, go back to the question we started with. Why split 3 carriers across 3 oceans, instead of stacking them into 1 fist? Because a fist hits 1 spot. And 1 spot is a problem any defense can solve. But 3 blades, positioned at 3 choke points, arriving from 3 azimuths, that is not a problem. That is an equation with no solution. Mass is what amateurs worship. Position is what engineers build. 2 carriers fought the opening war. They tore corridors through Iran's air defense. They destroyed the coastal threats guarding the choke points. And then they did what no amount of bombing alone can do. They sat at the doors and locked them. No oil out through Hormuz, no weapons in through Bab el-Mandeb, no lifeline through Suez. The bombs opened the locks. The geometry sealed them shut. Iran spent 40 years preparing for a war from one direction. They built the right weapons, they trained the right doctrine, they solved the equation perfectly. Except it was the wrong equation. The enemy never came through the door. The enemy surrounded the building, locked every exit, and waited for the air to run out. 3 carriers will not win this war because they carry more weapons. They will win because they hold the only 3 positions on Earth that matter. The 3 choke points connecting the regime to revenue, resupply, and oxygen. Block those, and physics handles the rest. No negotiation needed, no ground troops deployed, no territory occupied, just 3 steel cities floating in international waters, answering to no host nation, requiring no permission to remain. Quietly strangling an economy that cannot survive without the corridors we now control. That is not firepower, that is geometry, and geometry does not negotiate. The 3rd vertex is crossing the Atlantic. The equation is already solved, if you understand why. Share this with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to Navy Decoded so you never miss the next equation.